Good evening, good morning, good
Hello.
afternoon, good midnight. How are you doing?
Good. How about you?
Excellent. Swimmingly. Fantastic.
Good to hear.
Yes. And the new reboot branch is making good progress too.
So
And so I thought,
what is the reboot? Because I don't think we were using that word last time.
right. So we're going to launch relaunch the chain with a new Genesis block. And that whole process is called the reboot or the reset, depending on which word you prefer.
And
But
and, and for
certainly,
and for those that might be joining in now and did not see the last two episodes, say why are we doing that?
it's because we found a catastrophic, undetectable inflation bug, and
As you do.
uh, as privacy chains are particularly vulnerable too, because oftentimes chains have inflation bugs, but on transparent chains you can detect them and then you can fix it, and then you still have certainty about the money supply. But on a privacy chain, if there's an inflation bug, you cannot detect that it's being exploited, and so you don't know what to fix. And if you continue, then you have no certainty about the money supply, which is why we made the decision to reboot the chain with a new Genesis block such that we do have certainty about the money supply. It also means, though, that people who have coins on the old chain, it doesn't mean that their coins are gone, but it does mean that they have to go through a claims procedure to reclaim their coins on the new chain. And so we can talk about that, or we can talk about the reboot features, or we can talk about both, depending on how much time we have.
So let's talk about the claims process, because we talked about that I think 2 weeks ago, and it was still all sort of hypothetical, not yet implemented. So now it's been implemented. So
Yes.
how does it look? Have there been any changes in comparison to what you were thinking?
I'd say there were changes, but the changes were superficial. By and large, in big picture terms, the changes agree with what we set out at the start. Um, so it looks like the block subsidy schedule on the new chain is being fast forwarded by 2131 zero blocks. So there are just that many fewer blocks before the first halving, corresponding to the 2131 zero blocks that were mined on the old chain. And the block subsidies for those blocks will be allocated to a claims fund from which we can disburse claims of Neptune coins given proofs of ownership. And so for the time being, we will be custodians of this fund, and we will be manually entertaining claims. And we have already written the software to produce these claims in a format that we are comfortable with, um, such that fraudulent claims are difficult to exercise. So long story short, in order to exercise a claim, what you will need to do is you need to boot up or synchronize your node on the old chain to block 21310 and install the latest version of the software. And then you have a command line interface argument or command line interface command that will scan all the UTXOs that you have ownership of, and it will produce a proof of ownership that's valid for that block. And that proof of ownership is a file which you can send to us, or you can verify it locally. In fact, before sending it to us, it makes sense to verify it locally. And we can verify it as well. And then we can see how many coins are to be allocated to a address, which you can specify. And if you send us such a claim before we relaunch, then we'll be able to integrate that into the Genesis block. And if you send us such a claim after we relaunch, then we'll have to make a manual transaction.
Okay. And so, what do you say to the people that that might be worried about, the centralized nature of this, and also it sounds like they need to get in touch with you through, I don't know, email or Telegram, that goes against the blockchain and the scalable privacy ethos.
Well, they don't have to get their coins back. It's an opt-in process. And we don't owe anybody anything. So from my perspective, we're not breaking any promises, if that's where you're going at.
I guess what I'm asking is that I imagine that many of the early adopters are early adopters because they think there's merit to the sort of the Neptune promise of scalable privacy, and then it might be a bit disappointing that they need to sort of go to a central location to sort of get their money, kind of work.
Yeah. From my perspective, the alternative to this claims fund is no claims fund, and resetting with no means to get redemption. And so, yeah, to people who complain about this, I'd say you take what you can get, and if your privacy really is so important, then maybe you should donate those coins to the ecosystem, which you can do, by the way, because we haven't decided what we're going to do with the unclaimed coins, but we're certainly not going to keep them. So either we burn them after a specific amount of time, or we put them into a smart contract that can handle the disbursements for us. And so either way, if you don't claim the coins long enough, it will be as if they don't exist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. And just to emphasize, it's because the very integrity of the blockchain was at stake.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Anything else to mention in this area?
Yes, which is that it's a separate branch on the repository. So you won't be able to exercise this claim if you check out master or if you install the latest version. You have to specifically check out branch redeem, and then you can activate the commands. But there will be a tutorial on exactly how to do it. I just haven't gotten around to writing it yet, because I haven't gotten around to testing it in the wild yet, but I have run successful unit tests.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so
What
that was one conclusion of a long line of successful work. And the other conclusion is the merger of branch Reboot, which contains not just the fix to the soundness error, monetary soundness error, but a bunch of other features, which I thought we could get into. It also explains, by the way, why it took us so long to fix a bug that was on the surface very simple. And yes, it was a simple bug. The reason why it took us so long is because we made use of the opportunity to sneak in a bunch of features and corrections that would otherwise have been infeasible to ship or correct. Starting with a couple of extra checks in consensus programs, not because we suspect that there's a vulnerability, it's just because we like deep security, and we had the opportunity, so we modified some programs and added extra memory bounds checks and the like. So the new branch needs to, the new blockchain needs to have an account or a UTXO or a fund that's managing the skipped block subsidies. And so that's being applied as well. We modified the transaction data structure, specifically the inputs. We were busy writing this before we discovered the inflation bug. That this was going to be the heart of hard fork 2, before we discovered that we needed something more dramatic than a hard fork. The motivation for this change in data structure is to shrink the inputs of transactions in size, compress them, and as a result, we are saving 90% of the space of typical transactions. So long story short, the throughput capacity on the new chain is a lot more. We changed a field in the block header that previously prevented cold mining, and now it's enabled. So cold mining is where you are running a miner and the secret spending key that can spend the funds that you earn through mining, guessing in particular in this case, that secret spending key is living in a vault in cold storage and is not touching computers while you are guessing. And the reason why it was previously impossible is because you needed to derive the guesser digest from that key. And that guesser digest needed to be in the block while you guess. And now it's possible because the guesser digest has been removed in favor of something that doesn't require the secret key to be in RAM while you guess. This is answering a complaint that miners had. Also, back on the branch where we were implementing hard fork 2, we had a lot of versioning rules because it's difficult to launch a hard fork when you're changing the programs that you're validating, because you need to know which programs to verify. And it's difficult because the new set of consensus rules are valid at a given block height. But before then, the old consensus rules were valid. And so the client software needs to be aware of at least 2 sets of consensus rules. And so there's a lot of versioning scaffolding present in the source code now that we decided to keep, even though we could have dispensed with it. And we're keeping it because we anticipate hard forks in the future, more hard forks in the future. In particular, when we have upgrades for Triton VM, the Stark engine. We've fixed a bunch of superficial bugs, and a lot of the data structures were surprisingly unextendable. If they pass over the wire as a message sent between peers, then it makes sense to have extendable data structures, and the way we were deriving that serialization kind of limited us to the messages that we had already cast in stone upon launching the Genesis block back in February. And so now we made sure to make those data structures extendable. So if we want to introduce new peer messages or new networks or what have you, then we can do so without much hassle.
So was this, should we imagine that this was like a list of bugs in your backlog that you've noted down over the last months, maybe year, and that you were like for most of them you're like, that's so stupid not to put that in the first place, and then now you're happy to put those in?
I'd say that's about 90% correct. Most of these features are not bugs, because it's doing what it's advertised. But yeah, it's like a tattoo of the name of your ex on your breast. It's there for life, and you regret having it, and then you have this one opportunity to start over, and so obviously you're getting rid of that tattoo. That's how I feel about it. Yeah, these are regrettable design decisions that we're correcting through this golden opportunity. That said, there are probably other regrettable design decisions that we could have opted to correct at the expense of a lot more development time. And I guess the ball, I'm not sure how that expression is going to end. We haven't quite decided yet where our threshold for good features lies. We're trying to strike a balance between fixing such regrettable tattoos and launching quickly. And so there are a few more smaller issues that we need to talk about and decide and implement possibly. But right now we have a branch on GitHub. In fact, it was merged into master just today, that we could relaunch with. And so I believe that we already have a testnet running. And so you can point your node there if you like, just to verify that everything is running smoothly. And if it's not, then you can complain, and we might have another opportunity to fix something important before the relaunch happens.
And how has the community responded so far, if at all? I mean, you mentioned miners earlier. Like, how has the response been?
Some folks are unhappy, and most folks, I get the impression, are saying, yeah, if there's a bug, then you got to fix it. Yeah, I don't know what most people are thinking, actually, because there's a lot of observers in there, in the Telegram channel and other channels. And maybe they don't have a very pronounced opinion either, which is usually the case when people don't offer their opinion.
We could host, like, maybe before the actual reboot, we could do a live Q&A session and see if there's an appetite for that, and if the questions pop up that you can answer ad hoc.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Will we be able to rely on you for emceeing that?
Of course, yeah.
Sounds good.
I wouldn't propose it otherwise.
Tricky. Good. Yeah, but I'm game.
All right, cool. Maybe that's a good note to end on.
Indeed. Take care.
All right.
See you at the Q&A.
Yeah, see you at the Q&A.
Bye-bye.